Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. It was clear pretty quickly that I had bitten off more than I could chew. As I went to bed one night recently, I was thinking about what I had planned to do the next day, which was coming up with a new topic for another week of Pastor Gary Live episodes and beginning to write them, and I suddenly thought, it will be right after Mother's Day. Why don't I do a week on mothers in the Bible? Well, that was all well and good, but then my mind started racing on some of the mothers I could think of offhand that we could talk about, and then my list kept growing and getting longer. So I thought I could do obscure and forgotten mothers, and then I started to think about some of those too. It took me a while to fall asleep because, you see, the Bible story has lots of mothers in it, some good and some bad. So that's where I ended up. For the next 2 weeks, we're going to spend our time talking about mothers in the Bible. One day we'll look at one of those bad mothers, and the next we will consider a good mother, and we'll go back and forth that way. We might even encounter some of those obscure ones along the way. As we begin, we might as well start with as bad as it gets and consider Jezebel. She's not really known as a mother in the Bible, but she was. And the problem was her influence on her children. And since her children and grandchildren ruled Israel, her influence became a problem for the nation. Jezebel was a princess in the land of Phoenicia, which is sort of where Lebanon is today. It's right next to Israel on the Mediterranean Sea, and in fact the Phoenicians were known as seafarers and traders. In those days, treaties between nations were sealed by royal marriages, and so it was that Jezebel married one of the kings of Israel to mark good relations between the two nations. The king she married was named Ahab. Now, the treaty was well and good, but the problem was that since Jezebel was from Phoenicia, she was not a follower of God, and instead worshipped Baal. And the first hint of trouble brewing was that Ahab built a temple to Baal so that his wife could worship and take leadership roles in the worship of Baal. So, in the middle of Israel, among people who were supposed to worship God alone, King Ahab built a temple to Baal. It's a pretty bad start, and from there things got worse. Jezebel was able to influence Ahab in many ways, and pretty soon there were more altars to Baal going up throughout the land. Her influence was directly opposite the first of the 10 Commandments, that there should be no other gods than God. All this upset Elijah, the prophet of God at that time, and eventually he challenged the prophets of Baal to a showdown on Mount Carmel. And to show you Jezebel's influence, by then there were 400 prophets of Baal compared to Elijah standing alone as the prophet of God. You likely know the story of how Elijah challenged them to prepare the altar and call on Baal to send down fire, and how nothing happened. Then Elijah prepared his altar, wet it down, and prayed one prayer, and fire came down and consumed the sacrifice, the stone altar, and the water he had wet it down with. Having demonstrated which God was real, then Elijah killed all 400 prophets of Baal. Jezebel, however, vowed to kill Elijah within 24 hours. At first, Elijah fled, but God sent him back to continue preaching. The next time Jezebel shows up involves the story of Naboth's vineyard. Naboth was a man who had a vineyard that was doing very well. In fact, it was doing so well that King Ahab wanted it, even though he had his own vineyard right next door. But when he approached Naboth about buying the field, Naboth refused to sell because the land had been passed down in his family. At that time in Israel, they thought that such land had been granted to their family by God, and following God's will meant that you kept the land. Well, when he couldn't get it, King Ahab went to his bed and pouted with his face to the wall. Jezebel said, "Get up. Aren't you the king? I'll take care of it." And Jezebel arranged for Naboth to be falsely accused, and he was convicted and executed. Then she told Ahab to go and seize the field. But Elijah knew what had happened and publicly accused Ahab of murder and theft. A few years later, Ahab died, and there was a confusing line of succession to follow. But when it was all sorted out, the new king entered the city, and Jezebel appeared in the window, adorned in finery, as if to say she was still in charge. The new king had her defenestrated. That's a great word that means he had her thrown out of a window. Jezebel died in the street, and before she could be buried, stray dogs came and devoured her, except for her skull, her feet, and the palms of her hands. It was understood as a fitting end for an evil woman. It's quite a story of a person who chose just about every way she could not to follow God or care for her neighbors. As a mother, she taught her children to worship Baal, and then when they became the rulers of Israel, things didn't go well for the nation, and eventually for her or her children. No wonder we don't name our children Jezebel. May the mothers in our lives live to point to God. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.